Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hi friends, this is Sarah Collins, occupational therapist and homeschool mom, and your host of the OT is In podcast. Today we're talking about a sensory system that doesn't get enough airtime, but quietly shapes our behavior, emotions, and even our ability to learn and engage every day. And that is the sense of proprioception. In today's episode, we will define that term, talk about why it matters, and give you lots of ways to add it through the day for both you and your family. Before we really dive in though, I need to thank CTC Math, our title sponsorship for this episode. You'll hear more from them later in the episode, but it's important to know that they help make the OT is In and everything behind the scenes possible. So thank you, CTC. Now, on with the show. Hey, and welcome back. Let's get started today by clearly defining what we mean by proprioception, because it's often misunderstood or lumped together with other sensory systems. According to the American Occupational Therapy Association, proprioception is the sense that tells us where body parts are in space without having to look. This information comes from receptors in our muscles, joints, and tendons that respond to pressure, compression, and stretching. It plays a critical role in helping us generate coordinated, efficient movement and guiding us to use the right amount of force for everyday activities. Things like holding a pencil without snapping it, or climbing the stairs without watching every single step, or lifting an object without over or underestimating its weight. In other words, proprioception is how your body knows how much and where, how much force to use, how far to reach, how firmly to grip, all without conscious thought. This is where it's helpful to contrast proprioception with the vestibular system, because these two are often confused. So again, let's go back to the AOTA, or the American Occupational Therapy Association, for its definition. It says the vestibular system is located in the inner ear and is responsible for detecting motion and movement throughout space. It affects posture, balance, coordination, attention, and arousal. I often describe that as the body's GPS for movement. So it tells us when we're moving, how fast, in what direction, helping us to stay upright and oriented. So while the vestibular system tells us that we are moving, proprioception tells us how our body is moving and how much effort that movement requires. Both systems work closely together, but they serve different roles. And today, we're focusing on proprioception because of its powerful ability to organize and calm the nervous system. All right, let's make this a little bit more concrete by picturing a child climbing a tree. Okay, when this child climbs the tree, both the proprioceptive system and the vestibular system are working at the same time. Also lots of other systems, but we're just going to focus on these two. And they're doing very different jobs. Proprioception is responsible for everything related to body awareness, force, and effort. So as this child climbs, proprioception is telling them how hard to grip the branch so their hands don't slip, how much force to use to pull their body upwards, where their feet are placed on the trunk or branch without needing to look and stare down at their feet, how much pressure to push through their legs to stand and balance, how tightly to squeeze their muscles to stay stable. Every time a child pulls, pushes, hangs, squeezes, or bears weight through their arms and legs, they're getting strong proprioceptive input. And that deep input through the muscles and joints is incredibly organizing and grounding for the nervous system. This is why tree climbing, even though it looks big and active, it often leads kids to feel calmer, more regulated afterwards, and not more wound up. Their nervous system just received a lot of rich proprioceptive feedback that says, I know where my body is, I feel grounded, and I feel safe. The vestibular system is doing a different job. While climbing the tree, that vestibular input is coming from moving upwards off the ground, shifting the head position as you look up or down or all around. It also comes from changes in balance as the weight shifts from foot to foot, and can even help us or your kiddo when they're feeling slightly unsteady if they're reaching for that next branch. So the vestibular system is detecting the movement, the speed, and the changes in the orientation. It tells the brain we're going up, we're moving, we're off the ground. This system plays a big role in alertness and arousal, which is why vestibular input can be alerting for some kids and calming for others, depending on the type of intensity and movement. So here's the key point that I want you to hear about this. A child who is running, climbing, crashing, or hanging is often searching for proprioceptive input, which is the most organizing and calming of our senses. The vestibular system may be activated by the motion, but the proprioceptive input through the muscles and joints that often provides this calming effect. So if your child is climbing trees, hanging from monkey bars, or crashing into pillows, they're not trying to get more hyper. They're often trying to regulate their nervous system by flooding it with proprioceptive input. Once you understand this, it changes how you respond. Instead of stopping the behavior or saying, calm down, they literally are trying to calm down. Instead, ask, where can I safely offer more of this kind of input? Or how can I build this into our day on purpose? Now, let's think about what does this actually look like in real life? Because I want to get a little bit more practical. Understanding proprioception conceptually is one thing, but you need help recognizing what it looks like woven into your normal day, not as added on another thing to manage. This is where that support becomes sustainable. So let's walk through a typical day together and notice where proprioception naturally fits. Many of the children I work with struggle in the morning either because their bodies feel under-responsive or because they start their day already dysregulated. In both cases, the nervous system benefits from early proprioceptive input before cognitive demands increase. For some families, mornings improve when children are given jobs that require pushing, lifting, or carrying. Carrying a laundry basket, moving chairs into place at a table, unloading groceries, or transporting school materials from one room to another provides deep input through those joints and muscles. These activities help the body feel oriented and grounded. For children who appear overly active in the morning, the instinct is often to limit movement. But what I often recommend instead is more structured proprioceptive work. Wall push-ups, chair push-downs, squeezing something, a therapy ball or stuffed animal, pulling resistance bands to provide organizing input. All of this helps to prevent that chaotic movement later. When proprioception is offered early in the day, many families report smoother transitions into academic work with fewer power struggles. The goal is not to burn energy or to say, I have to help my kiddo get their energy out. Instead, the goal is to give the nervous system clear grounding input so it knows where the body is and what it's doing. It's also important to discuss the purpose of this at your child's developmental level. Their knowledge of how their brain works and their needs could be the most important part of their education because it's what they will definitely carry over into their day-to-day life. So let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. And when we return, we'll talk through some other typical areas where intentional proprioception could make a huge impact. In our first few episodes of 2026, we're talking a lot about acceptance and expectance. Accepting where children truly are today and expecting that with the right support, they will grow. CTC Math makes that possible. As an occupational therapist, I see how essential it is to honor each child's starting point without rushing them ahead. And CTC Math's Mastery-based approach means that your child stays with a concept until it makes sense. No pressure to keep up with an external pace, no fear of hidden gaps. You have access to all levels at one time, so if fractions are hard, you can jump back to where they were introduced in prior grade levels. This allows us to accept today's skill level and expect steady growth through clear teaching, short lessons, and a structure that reduces overwhelm. With built-in progress tracking, you'll always know that your child's strengths and the next step in their learning, acceptance of the present, and confidence for the future. Be sure to check the show notes for a link to try CTC Math free and a coupon code for 50% off for a year, which is exclusive to Homeschool OT. Because honoring where kids are now is the first step to encouraging them to where they are going. Welcome back. Now let's talk even more practical about how we can add this proprioception into your day-to-day life. A lot of my clients talk about mealtime challenges. These are very common and often misunderstood. Difficulty staying seated, constant movement, or chewing behaviors are often signs that the body needs more proprioceptive input. In practice, I often recommend involving children in the physical aspects of meal preparation and cleanup. Carrying plates, pouring drinks, stirring or kneading dough, or pushing chairs into place all provide deep input that supports postural stability and body awareness. Chewing is also proprioceptive. For children who struggle to sit or attend at meals, offering foods that require more oral work can be regulating. Crunchy or chewy textures provide input through this jaw that help to organize the nervous system. And when these supports are in place, families often notice improved tolerance for sitting and greater engagement during the meals without needing constant reminders like sit still. Another part of the day that parents tell me they really struggle is transitions. These are some of the most dysregulating moments of the day. Like we're moving from free play and then we're like, hey, I need you to come on in. It's time to read or whatever that we need to do. Or if we're moving from inside to outside or activity to rest, these shifts ask the nervous system to reorganize really quickly and get something done. Instead of rushing through these transitions, this is where proprioception can act as a bridge, especially if it has a beginning and an end. Now, back in episode 18, Karen Randall, who's an OT in Canada, she focuses primarily on sleep in her practice. She discussed the concept of a start and stop activity. This is an obstacle course that you can crawl up the stairs, grab that pile of pillows, and carry them to the bedroom. There's the end, right? The bedroom is the end. Or when my kiddos were little, we used to do what we called mommy races. So these were done at any location, usually when we were standing in a line or we had to wait for some reason. And I would say, for example, run to the phone pole, jump 3 times, and elephant walk back to me, right? So I'm giving them 3 ideas to do, and there's a beginning and an end. Now, for some kiddos that can't follow that many commands, activities with specific tools that you can model can be really helpful. Push against the wall, or again, pull on this resistance band, carry the stack of books to the shelf. At this point, the transition becomes physical before it becomes cognitive. For some siblings, transitions might look like group work, right? So one child can hold the door while another pushes the heavy bin to get in. So it's teamwork and in a group setting, right? Someone could carry the trash out. Someone could lift up the trash barrel or whatever you have to put it in. These are all shared tasks that helps to regulate bodies while also reducing power struggles because we're doing it together. Another conversation that I frequently have with parents is that they're very concerned when their kiddos will not sit still during learning. Now, what I often say is that this sustained attention, right, our focus on one thing, it depends on body regulation, not just on motivation or compliance. When we talk about learning, it's important to start with the body. Attention, fine motor control, and endurance all depend on stability, depends on regulation. If a child is sitting in a chair, one of the first things I look for clinically is foot support. Feet need to be able to touch the floor or a stable surface. Or like mine are right now, I'm going to show you. If you're watching on YouTube, they are literally sitting on this sit disc. so that I have some movement, and it actually gives extra proprioception because of the little beads in it. Again, feet need to be able to touch the floor or the stable surface. If they're dangling, their body has to work extra hard just to stay upright, which pulls energy away from learning. Sometimes the simplest support is adding a box, a stool, stacked books under the feet so that the body feels grounded. And that said, and this is especially important for homeschool families, learning does not have to happen in a chair. One of the benefits of homeschooling is that we're not limited by the structure of a traditional classroom. Many children regulate better and learn more efficiently when they're not expected to sit upright at a desk or for long periods of time. In my work with families, I often recommend experimenting with alternative seating and learning positions. Some children do well sitting on steps where their feet are firmly planted. This was perfect when my kiddos were little because that bottom step would give them a 90-degree angle at their hips and their knees, and then I could put something right on their laps to hold their focus in front of them. Other kiddos focus better on the couch, surrounded by pillows that provide deep pressure or support through the trunk. Floor work can be regulating when a child has something to lean into or push against. And for children who need more movement to stay regulated, guys, learning happens well while moving. Short academic tasks can be paired with time on a trampoline, using a scooter board down a hallway, pacing outdoors while reciting facts, listening to an audiobook while walking around, standing on a balance board, like to answer flashcards or things like that. These activities provide strong proprioceptive input through the joints and muscles, which does help that nervous system stay organized. Guys, being outside is another powerful option, like reading while swinging gently or practicing spelling words while walking. Again, doing math facts after climbing or pushing a wheelbarrow. All of this integrates movement and learning in a way that many children need. So, the key point that I want you to hear from that is stillness is not a prerequisite for learning. Regulation is. When the body feels supported and organized, attention and participation follow, regardless of whether that happens seated in a chair, on a floor, the couch, or in the yard. Homeschooling gives families the flexibility to meet sensory needs without fighting them. And when we use that flexibility intentionally, learning becomes more accessible and far less stressful for everyone. Here's another example. By the end of the day, many children appear tired but restless. This is often a sign that the nervous system has not had enough grounding input to shift towards rest. In the evening, I often guide families towards calming proprioceptive activities, helping with household chores that involve pushing or carrying, rolling in a blanket. Used to call this the burrito blanket in my house, firm hugs, or returning toys to shelves. All of this provides deep pressure that supports regulation. And guys, these activities help the body to transition out of the state of alertness and into readiness for sleep. When evening routines include proprioception, families often report fewer bedtime struggles and easier time settling down. Across families, the pattern is consistent. If proprioception is offered intentionally throughout the day, children are less likely to seek it through running, crashing, or unsafe behaviors. Those behaviors are not attention seeking, they're regulation seeking. All right, so let's talk about this in relationship to age. I want to walk through proprioception across some developmental stages using my own son as a through line, right? Not because his story is unique, but because it reflects the patterns that I see over and over again with families that I support. If you want to hear more of his early story, we went much deeper back into it in episode 8 with him, but I want to highlight it here specifically through this lens of proprioception. So, as a toddler, he was constantly crashing, jumping, seeking impact. He ran into furniture. He jumped repeatedly. He needed intense movement throughout the day. At the time, this made sense when we considered his history, because he was born prematurely and had both visual and auditory challenges. But I did not know that at the time. Because those sensory systems were less reliable, he learned about his world primarily through movement. Isn't it beautiful how I can say this now that he's 14 and looking back? But I'm telling you, in those moments, it was really difficult because I didn't know until he was about 7 or 8 about those vision challenges. I did know his auditory history about age 4, but before that, we were seeing these struggles and continuous needing for movement. That movement that gave him information, it helped him to orient to his world. But when you're moving all the time, using that vestibular system, it can be highly alerting. So, alongside all of this vestibular input, his body sought the proprioception to calm and organize itself. He was in this continuous back and forth of alert, calm, alert, calm, alert, calm. That required crashing into surfaces for him. He was jumping with force, so much so that when he began climbing out of his crib, I literally would get him out and then take the crib mattress entirely and place it on the floor for him to jump and crash. I would follow him around with it because he needed that input and I needed to make sure that he could get it safely. It wasn't about stopping his behaviors. It was recognizing what his nervous system asked for and meeting that need appropriately. Now, as he moved into these early childhood years out of toddlerhood, the need didn't go away, but it did become more refined. Between about 6 and 8 years old, this kiddo would climb everything: trees, play structures, furniture, if I would let him. If there was something vertical, his body was drawn to it. And again, this wasn't impulsivity for him, it was regulation. At this stage, we intentionally made outdoor hikes part of our weekly routine and outdoor time our daily routine. This wasn't necessarily exercise, but as nervous system support. We would bring walkie-talkies with us so he could climb trees ahead of us and explore independently and still stay connected. Now, what stood out to me as both a mom and an occupational therapist was how well he physically knew his body. That same play that could be unsafe or dangerous for any other kiddos was just risky and calculated and controlled for him. His proprioceptive system gave him precise information about force, position, and movement. And what looked risky from the outside was actually well regulated, body aware play. This is something that I want you to hear clearly because when proprioception is well developed, children often have a strong internal sense of safety, even in big movement. Sometimes we as parents don't want to let our children experiment because others may follow and not be safe. I totally get that. He has little brothers, right? Sometimes we don't want to let our children experiment also because of judgment or social expectations. I get that as well. I can't tell you how many other parents would stare at me when I'm giving him his walkie-talkie and allowing him to go ahead. But you know your child. And these conversations are important to have with your child. When our hikes included little kids following along, that's why we had these walkie-talkies. So he could tell me his plan and then not be in the sight of other little ones. Because no, his little brother couldn't go do the exact same things, nor could the other kiddos on our hikes. We had many conversations throughout his days, like, I know you need to jump, but off the stairs near your grandparents' glass table is not the spot. What else could you do, or where else could I take you? This was especially important around holiday times or activities that we wouldn't typically do, where he couldn't predict what the environment would be, and he would need to calm his nervous system more frequently. Now, as he's gotten older, that need for proprioception still remains. It's just expressed through more age appropriate and purposeful occupations. He still requires daily proprioceptive input to regulate his nervous system. That now looks like working out every day and playing hockey for a minimum of 2 hours a day. These activities provide sustained input through the muscles and joints that help him to stay regulated, focused, and grounded. This is a critical point for parents of older children and teens because many people ask me, are they going to grow out of this? Guys, sensory needs don't disappear, they mature. I often say they don't grow out of it, they grow into it. But this is only true if they've learned to advocate and not to ignore. His sensory systems play a major role in helping the nervous system stay at the right level of alertness for learning. When a child's sensory needs are met, their body can stay calm and focused enough to engage. When those needs aren't met, their nervous system can swing in either direction, becoming either too sleepy and disconnected or vice versa, too overwhelmed and reactive. In both cases, learning becomes much harder because the brain is in a state that supports attention. For adolescents, proprioception often shows up in sports, strength training, physical work, or demanding hobbies. And when those needs are met, we often see better emotional regulation, resilience, and self awareness. And who doesn't want that for their teenagers? If they're not, we may see more irritability, shutdown, or restlessness. And oftentimes that gets mislabeled as attitude or a lack of motivation. When we are asking our children to ignore or suppress their sensory needs in the name of compliance, their nervous system has to work overtime just to stay regulated. And that extra effort pulls energy away from that thinking, that problem solving, and learning. So instead of using their brains for schoolwork or connection, they're using it just to keep themselves together. Now, I've linked two articles, one from Frontiers Journal in Psychology and one from Child Mind Institute, that go more deeply for those of you who are interested in this. We also have a previous episode on masking that I will link in the show notes as well. Guys, understanding this proprioception and how it supports learning allows parents to respond with support rather than correction. And proprioception becomes a foundation for emotional regulation, attention, and participation in daily life. So let's bring this home. We're going to wrap it all up here for you in a nice little bow. Understanding proprioception helps you to interpret behaviors as sensory regulation attempts. It allows you to use heavy work strategically instead of reactively, and to build calm, focused learning windows without power struggles. So it's not about forcing movement, rather it's about harnessing this purposeful proprioceptive input to support emotional regulation and attention. I'm laughing because I would like you all to try to say purposeful proprioceptive input over and over again. I need some jaw proprioception right now. And yes, guys, this does mean running, jumping, and crashing moments might actually be your child's nervous system asking for the very input that it needs to stay regulated. So instead of saying, stop doing that, or calm down, instead think, how can I give you the right kind of input in a way that supports your day? So here's your final reminder. Proprioception isn't a trick or a quick fix. Instead, it's a foundational sensory system to support regulation, attention, and participation in everyday life. If your kiddo is running, crashing, squeezing, seeking pressure, they are not misbehaving. They're communicating a need through their nervous system. Understanding that is the first step. Implementing it in a way that works for your family is the next. So to support you with that, we have a handout of sensory activity ideas. This gives ideas for each sensory system, including proprioception. You can download that guide at homeschoolote.com or from the link in the show notes. And if you're listening and thinking, I understand this, but I'm not sure how to make it work in our specific homeschool day, that's exactly where coaching sessions come in. During coaching, we look at your child, your routines, and your environment together. We identify what your child's nervous system is asking for and build a plan that fits you in real life, not an ideal schedule. Guys, thanks for spending time with me in The OT is In. I'm Sarah Collins, occupational therapist and homeschool mom. Remember, you don't have to figure this out alone. Homeschooling is not alone schooling because the OT is always in.